I'd perfected the art of being invisible long before tonight, but standing in the grand hall of the Moonstone Pack with every eye trained on the entrance, I'd never felt more exposed or more certain that I didn't belong here. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, illuminating Omegas who moved like they were born to be admired. Their confidence hung in the air like expensive perfume, sweet and suffocating. I pressed myself against a pillar near the refreshment tables, smoothing down the emerald silk dress that Elder Simmons had provided. Beautiful fabric, wrong girl. "You'll do perfectly, Aniyah," she'd told me 3 hours ago, though her attention had already shifted to the doorway, calculating something I wasn't meant to understand. I wasn't stupid. The Moonstone Pack didn't invest in nobodies without reason. This gathering drew unmated alphas from across the territories, a glittering marketplace of bloodlines and alliances. At 24, I was past my prime by Omega standards, overlooked at every previous gathering, lacking the magnetic pull that made alphas lose their senses. Where others blazed, I barely flickered, a candle flame in a room full of bonfires. The hall fell silent. I felt him before I saw him. Alpha King Kayden Long didn't enter rooms. He claimed them. The crowd parted instinctively, wolves recognizing apex predator, and I found myself with an unobstructed view of the most dangerous man in the Northern Territories. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of controlled power that suggested he could shatter bone without raising his voice. Dark hair, sharp jawline, and those eyes. Amber like aged whiskey, cold as winter dawn. They swept across the hall with calculated disinterest, cataloging and dismissing each eager face. Then they landed on me. My breath caught. For 3 heartbeats, maybe 4, Kayden Long stared at me like I was the only person in the room. Not with desire, I'd know what that looked like even if I'd never inspired it, but with something stranger. Recognition. As if he saw past the pillar I'd been hiding behind, past the borrowed dress, straight through to the bone-deep loneliness I thought I'd hidden well enough. His eyes held the same isolation I felt, just wrapped in authority instead of invisibility. "Aniyah Berry." Elder Simmons appeared at my elbow, her voice pitched low and urgent. "Come with me, now." She steered me into an antechamber off the main hall where 3 pack leaders stood waiting, their expressions carefully neutral. "You've been selected for a very important role," Elder Simmons began, and the word role hit me like a slap. Not chosen. Cast. The Alpha King requires a companion for the coming weeks. Someone presentable but unremarkable. Someone who won't attract undue attention or complicate matters. Translation. Someone forgettable. Someone no one would take seriously. Marcus, our head diplomat, stepped forward. "There's another Omega, one with the political connections and bloodline the King's Council requires, but she needs time to prepare, to be properly positioned. You'll serve as a distraction until arrangements are finalized." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. I was a decoy, a placeholder, valuable only in my absolute disposability. What if I refuse? "You won't." Elder Simmons' smile didn't reach her eyes. "Your family's debt to this pack isn't forgotten, Aniyah. This is how you repay it." Through the doorway, I could still see a sliver of the grand hall. Kayden Long stood alone despite the crowd pressing closer, his isolation somehow more complete than mine had ever been. An Alpha King surrounded by people who wanted something from him, never seeing the man beneath the crown. Elder Simmons pushed me gently toward the door. "He's going to ask for you specifically. We've already made certain of that. Smile. Be pleasant. Be forgettable. And for Goddess' sake, don't do anything to make this complicated." My heart hammered against my ribs as I stepped back into the hall. Kayden's gaze found me immediately, as if he'd been tracking me even through walls. He moved through the crowd with purpose, ignoring the Omegas who tried to intercept him, their practiced charm sliding off him like water off stone. He stopped 3 feet away. Up close, he was even more devastating and more guarded. Every line of his body screamed, "Control, control, control," but his eyes told a different story. "Aniyah Berry," he said, and my name sounded different in his voice. Important, real. "Alpha King," I managed, dropping into a curtsy that felt absurd. "May I have this dance?" He extended his hand, and the room held its breath. This was the moment, the trap closing, the role beginning. I placed my hand in his, and his fingers closed around mine with unexpected gentleness. The contact sent electricity racing up my arm, some primal part of my wolf recognizing something in his that shouldn't have been possible. As he led me onto the floor and pulled me into position, proper distance, appropriate touch, he leaned close enough that only I could hear. "I know what they told you," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear, "that this is pretense, that you're temporary, that I need someone unremarkable who won't complicate the politics." My heart stopped, but I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who see a crown instead of a person. And when I looked at you tonight, do you know what I saw? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Someone who understands what it means to be chosen for all the wrong reasons. The music swelled. He spun me effortlessly, and for one impossible moment I forgot we were performing. Forgot the pack leaders watching. Forgot that I was supposed to be forgettable. Because Kayden Long looked at me like I mattered, and even though I knew it was probably part of the act, even though I knew this would end in heartbreak, some part of me had already started to believe it might be real. What happens when the disposable pawn becomes essential? When the Alpha King who plans everything meets the Omega no one planned for? When two people playing roles for everyone else find the only truth that matters in each other? This is the story of how Aniyah Berry became a queen. Not through birthright or beauty, but through the kind of courage it takes to be authentically, impossibly yourself. The contract sat on Elder Simmons' desk like a coiled snake. Innocuous black ink on expensive parchment that would bind me to a lie for however long the Alpha King deemed necessary. My hand trembled as I signed my name, each letter a small surrender. "Excellent," Elder Simmons said, though her smile held no warmth. "Your family's debt is now considered paid in full. Your mother will be pleased." My mother would be relieved, not pleased. There was a difference. 3 years of medical care, of treatments that kept her alive when the wasting sickness should have claimed her. All of it funded by pack resources I could never hope to repay through normal means. Until now. Until I became useful in the only way someone like me could be. When do I leave? Tonight. The Alpha King departs within the hour. I barely had time to pack a single bag before I was escorted back to the Grand Hall, now emptied of its earlier glamour. Kayden Long stood near the entrance with 2 guards, his posture military straight, face unreadable. When he saw me, something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but an easing of the hard lines around his mouth. "Miss Berry," he said, and again my name sounded substantial in his voice, like it belonged to someone worth remembering. "Are you ready?" "No." "Yes, Alpha King." "Kayden," he corrected quietly. "When we're alone, just Kayden." The guards loaded my pitiful bag into a sleek black vehicle that probably cost more than my pack's entire annual budget. Kayden held the door open himself, waving off the guard who moved to do it. His fingers brushed mine as I climbed in, and that same electric current from our dance sparked between us. The interior smelled of leather and cedar. Kayden settled beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, far enough to be proper. The engine purred to life, and the Moonstone Pack territory began to slide past the tinted windows. Silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable exactly, but charged with everything unsaid. I studied him from the corner of my eye. He'd shed the formal jacket from earlier, rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows. Strong forearms, a thin scar running along his left wrist. He caught me looking, and I jerked my gaze away, heat flooding my cheeks. "You can ask," he said. "Ask what?" "Whatever you're wondering. We're going to be spending considerable time together. Might as well start with honesty where we can afford it." I gathered my courage. "The rumors say you're difficult, that you've refused every Omega presented to you for 3 years, that your council despairs of you ever choosing a mate. The rumors are partially correct." He turned to face me fully, those amber eyes steady. "I've refused every arrangement because they were exactly that, arrangements. Political chess moves where I'm the king piece, and some Omega is the queen, and neither of us has any say in how the game is played. But this," I gestured between us, "this is also an arrangement." "Yes." His jaw tightened. "But at least we both know it. At least we're not pretending this is something it isn't. Not to each other, anyway." The honesty disarmed me. I'd expected coldness, dismissal, perhaps cruelty veiled in courtesy, not this careful truth-telling from a man who supposedly felt nothing. "Why did you agree to this?" I asked. "You could have refused. You're the Alpha King." "Because my counsel was right about one thing. I do need to appear settled. There are challenges to my rule, territories that see my unwed status as weakness. This arrangement buys me time." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "And because when I looked at you tonight, I saw someone who understood the cage, even if the bars look different from mine." My throat tightened. Before I could respond, the vehicle began to slow. Through the windshield, an estate materialized from the darkness, all stone and glass and understated power, lit from within like a jewel box. "Welcome to Silvercrest," Kayden said. The head of a household met us at the entrance, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and an expression that could cut glass. "Alpha King," she said with a precise nod, then her gaze slid to me with barely concealed assessment. Her lips thinned. "Miss Berry." "Mrs. Chen manages the household," Kayden explained. "Anything you need, she'll provide." "Of course," Mrs. Chen said, though her tone suggested she'd provide the bare minimum and not a thread more. "I've prepared the rose suite as instructed." She led us through hallways that belonged in a museum. Art that probably cost more than my childhood home. Floors so polished I could see my reflection looking small and out of place. Kayden walked beside me, his presence somehow making the grandeur less overwhelming. The rose suite was absurd. A 4-poster bed that could sleep 5 people, windows overlooking gardens I could barely see in the darkness, an adjoining bathroom with a tub that qualified as a small pool. Everything was cream and gold and soft pink, delicate and feminine, and nothing like me. "This is too much," I whispered. Mrs. Chen sniffed. "I'll have your bag sent up." She swept out before I could thank her, disapproval radiating from every line of her rigid back. Kayden moved to the windows, hands in his pockets. "She'll warm to you, eventually. She thinks I'm a fraud. She thinks everyone's a fraud until proven otherwise. Trust is earned in this house, not given." He turned back to me, and in the soft lamplight he looked younger, less burdened. "I know what they told you, that you're temporary, forgettable, a means to an end. My heart hammered. Yes. He crossed the space between us, stopping just within reach, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. This is pretense, Aniyah. For the council, for the visiting dignitaries, for everyone watching. But I won't treat you as less than you are. Whatever happens, however this ends, you have my word. You'll be treated with respect under my roof, not as a pawn, as a person. The sincerity in his voice made my chest ache. This wasn't what I'd expected. None of this was. Thank you, I managed. He nodded once, then moved toward the door. Rest. Tomorrow starts early. Council meeting at 8. After he left, I sank onto the edge of that ridiculous bed, still wearing my borrowed dress, and stared at my reflection in the darkened windows. Somewhere in this vast estate, the Alpha King was probably strategizing, planning, being the ruler everyone needed him to be. And here I was, a girl who'd been chosen for her insignificance, wondering how I'd survive pretending to matter to a man who'd promised not to treat me as worthless. The problem was, I was already starting to believe he meant it. I lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a house too big and a life too complicated, wondering what exactly I'd gotten myself into, and why part of me wasn't entirely sorry I'd signed that contract. Morning arrived too soon, announced by a soft knock and Mrs. Chen's clipped voice through the door. Breakfast in the solarium, 10 minutes. I'd barely slept, my mind cycling through worst-case scenarios until dawn painted the windows pale gold. Now I stood before a closet that hadn't been empty last night. Someone had filled it with clothes in my size, each piece more expensive than anything I'd ever owned. I chose the simplest option, a dove-gray dress that whispered against my skin, and tried not to think about how temporary all of this was. The solarium was all glass and climbing jasmine, morning light streaming through in honeyed bands. Kayden sat at a small table overlooking the gardens, already dressed for business in a charcoal suit that made his amber eyes even more striking. He stood when I entered, the gesture so automatic it seemed bred into his bones. "Good morning," he said, pulling out a chair. "Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee, please." My voice came out steadier than I felt. He poured it himself, noting how I took it, black, no sugar, with the same attention he'd probably give to battle strategies. We ate in silence for a few moments, the clink of silverware almost deafening. "We should discuss expectations," Kayden said finally, setting down his fork. "What this arrangement requires." My stomach clenched. All right. Public appearances, galas, pack gatherings, territorial meetings. You'll attend as my companion. The council meets twice weekly. You'll sit beside me. To the outside world, we're courting seriously, moving toward a formal bonding. He spoke with clinical precision, like he was outlining treaty terms. Physical affection will be necessary in public. Nothing inappropriate, but enough to appear genuine. Hand-holding, standing close, perhaps dancing. Each word felt like a small cut. Necessary, appear genuine, not real. And in private? I asked. His gaze met mine, intense and unguarded for just a moment. In private, we're two people trying to survive a situation neither of us chose. No pretense required. "Unless Mrs. Chen is watching," I said, attempting lightness. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. Especially then. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings, a massive circular table of dark wood, seats arranged so that everyone could see everyone else. No hiding, no escape. 12 faces turned toward us as we entered, and I felt their assessment like ice water down my spine. Kayden guided me to a chair beside his at the head of the table, his hand briefly touching my lower back. The contact steadied me even as it sent my pulse racing. "Gentlemen, Lady Voss," Kayden said, his tone carrying effortless authority. "You've heard I'm courting seriously. This is Aniyah Berry of the Moonstone Pack." A man with silver threading his temples leaned forward. "Berry? I'm not familiar with that bloodline. Perhaps because it's not particularly notable." A woman in burgundy, Lady Voss said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No offense intended, dear." "None taken," I lied, folding my hands in my lap to stop them trembling. "Her bloodline is irrelevant," Kayden said, his voice dropping several degrees. "She's under my protection and will be treated with appropriate respect. Are we clear?" The temperature in the room shifted. Several council members exchanged glances. Lady Voss inclined her head. "Of course, Alpha King." The meeting proceeded with discussions of territorial disputes, trade agreements, and security concerns. I sat silent as instructed, but I listened. Kayden ran his council with firm control, never raising his voice but commanding absolute attention. When a younger advisor challenged a decision, Kayden didn't dismiss him. He explained his reasoning with patience that surprised me. "The Omega is very quiet," Lady Voss observed as the meeting wound down. "Perhaps overwhelmed by matters beyond her understanding?" The insult was delicate, gift-wrapped in concern. My jaw tightened. "Miss Berry is observing," Kayden said coolly, "a skill more advisors would benefit from cultivating." His eyes swept the table. "We're adjourned." As we left the chamber, his hand found mine briefly, a squeeze so quick I might have imagined it. But the warmth lingered. The evening gala was everything I dreaded. The ballroom at Silvercrest rivaled the Moonstone Gathering Hall, filled with the same polished wolves in more expensive clothes. Kayden had been pulled into conversations the moment we arrived, and I found myself alone near a marble pillar. Champagne I wasn't drinking clutched like a lifeline. "So, you're the Mystery Omega." I turned to find a striking woman with copper hair and emerald eyes studying me like I was a particularly disappointing painting. Her scent marked her as Omega, but everything else screamed Predator. "Aniyah Berry," I said, offering my hand. She looked at it like I'd offered her a dead fish. "Celeste Laurent, third daughter of the Laurent Pack, educated at the academy, trained in diplomacy and pack management." Each credential landed like a blow. "And you are?" "Just Aniyah." How refreshingly humble. Her smile was all teeth. "Everyone's wondering, why you? No connections, no notable achievements, no particular beauty." She said it conversationally, like discussing the weather. "The prevailing theory is that your practice, a safe option for the Alpha King to learn intimacy with before he chooses someone who actually matters." The words hit exactly where she'd aimed them, the soft, unprotected parts of me that already believed them. "Excuse me," I managed, turning away. "Oh, don't run off. I'm only being honest. Surely you've realized you're temporary." "Actually," a low voice said from behind me, "the only temporary thing here is your welcome." Kayden materialized at my side, his presence commanding immediate attention. Celeste's confidence faltered for a fraction of a second. "Alpha King, I was just leaving," he finished. "Immediately." She had the sense to retreat, though her exit radiated wounded pride. The crowd around us pretended not to watch while absolutely watching. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to cause—" "You caused nothing." Kayden turned to face me fully, and there was something fierce in his expression that made my breath catch. She was out of line. He extended his hand, ignoring the dozens of eyes tracking our every movement. "Dance with me." "Kayden, you don't have to." "I want to." His voice dropped lower. Please. I placed my hand in his, and he led me onto the floor as a waltz began. His right hand settled on my waist, and the contact sent electricity racing through my entire body. This close, I could see gold flecks in his amber eyes, could feel the controlled strength in how he held me. "You're better at this than you think," he murmured as we moved through the steps. "At dancing? At everything." His thumb traced a small circle against my waist. Whether consciously or not, I couldn't tell. "You sat through that council meeting with more grace than half my advisors show. You handled Celeste better than I would have. I almost ran away, but you didn't." We spun, and his hand tightened slightly, steadying me. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Aniyah?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "What?" "Someone stronger than she knows. Someone who doesn't realize that quiet observation is often more powerful than loud demands." His gaze held mine with uncomfortable intensity. "You're not temporary, not insignificant, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me." The music swelled around us. His hand on my waist felt like a brand, like a promise, like something far more dangerous than a pretend courtship had any right to feel. "This is just for show," I whispered, reminding myself as much as him. Something pained flickered across his features. "Yes," he agreed, but neither of us pulled away. And when the song ended, we stood there a moment too long, close enough that I could feel his heartbeat, fast and strong against my palm. This was pretense, I told myself as we finally separated. Just playing roles. But my racing heart called me a liar. 3 weeks disappeared like water through fingers. I stopped counting days and started counting moments instead. The morning Kayden laughed at something I said over coffee. The afternoon I found him reading in the library and he didn't pretend to be busy. The evening he asked my opinion on a trade dispute and actually listened to my answer. We developed rhythms without meaning to. Breakfast in the solarium became strategy sessions where he'd spread intelligence reports across the table and ask, "What do you see here?" At first, I thought he was testing me. Then I realized he genuinely wanted my perspective. The outsider's view, uncolored by years of political maneuvering. "The Loron Pack is positioning for something," I said one morning, studying shipping manifests. "They're stockpiling resources but claiming reduced harvests. The numbers don't match." Kayden leaned over my shoulder close enough that his scent, cedar and something darker, wilder, made my pulse skip. "Show me." I traced the discrepancies with my finger, hyper-aware of his proximity, his focused attention. Here and here. Either they're preparing for conflict or they're planning to withhold goods to force concessions. He straightened, something like admiration in his eyes. "I missed that completely. Thank you." These moments accumulated like snow, quiet and persistent, until I looked around and realized how much had changed. Dinners stretched longer as conversations deepened beyond politics into philosophy, books, the small absurdities of daily life. He told me about growing up in this estate, lonely despite the staff, trained from childhood to be perfect rather than happy. "My father believed emotion was weakness," Kayden said one evening as we walked the garden paths, moonlight silvering the roses. "He ruled through fear and distance. By the time he died, even his closest advisors didn't mourn him. They just worried who would fill the void." "You were young when you became Alpha King, 23, barely trained, completely unprepared." His jaw tightened. "The council wanted to make me a puppet. Lady Voss particularly. She thought she could control a grieving boy." "But you didn't let her." "No." He paused beside a fountain, its gentle, burbling the only sound in the stillness. I became what I needed to be. Hard, decisive, untouchable. It kept the pack safe, kept challengers at bay. But it also, he trailed off, staring at the water, made you lonely, I finished quietly. His gaze snapped to mine, startled by the accuracy. Yes, I understood that loneliness in ways I couldn't quite articulate. My whole life, I've been the Omega who didn't fit the mold. Not pretty enough, not charming enough, not enough of anything to matter. I learned to be invisible because being seen meant being found lacking. You're not invisible to me. The words hung between us, weighted with meaning neither of us could afford to acknowledge. I looked away first, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Tell me about your mother, I said, redirecting to safer ground. His expression softened. She died when I was 7. I barely remember her voice, but I remember how she made people feel, safe, valued. She saw my father's coldness and tried to balance it with warmth. After she was gone, there was nothing left but ice. I'm sorry. Don't be. It made me determined to rule differently. To lead with strength, yes, but also with... He hesitated, as if the word itself was dangerous. With heart. We walked in comfortable silence after that, and I marveled at how natural this had become, being beside him, sharing space without performance or pretense. Just two people who understood what it meant to wear masks for others while longing to be seen. Mrs. Chen thawed incrementally, like winter grudgingly yielding to spring. She stopped looking at me like I was a stain on her pristine household, and started including me in small decisions. Which flowers for the table arrangements, whether to serve salmon or venison at the next dinner. But it was Elena, one of the housekeepers who'd been kind from the start, who pulled me aside one afternoon as I returned from the library. "Miss Berry, might I speak with you?" She glanced around the hallway as if checking for observers. "Of course. What is it?" Elena smiled, something knowing and gentle in her expression. The household has noticed changes in the Alpha King. My stomach tightened. Changes? He laughs now. Did you know? Before you arrived, I worked here 3 years and never once heard him truly laugh. He was respected, certainly, but isolated. Like he'd built walls so high even sunlight couldn't reach him. She touched my arm lightly. You've brought light back to this house, dear. The staff sees it. Even Mrs. Chen, though she'd bite her tongue off before admitting it. Warmth flooded through me, dangerous and intoxicating. I know what you are, Elena said softly. Temporary, that's what they told you, isn't it? At my nod, her expression turned sad. I've watched him with you these weeks, the way he looks at you when you're not watching, the way he seeks your company even when he doesn't have to. Whatever started as pretense. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Just be careful, Miss Berry. Hearts don't respect arrangements no matter how clearly the terms are laid out. Elena, I say this with affection. You're good for him, but I'd hate to see you hurt when the inevitable happens. She squeezed my hand once, then disappeared down the hallway, leaving me frozen with her warning echoing in my mind. That evening, Kayden found me on the terrace overlooking the east gardens, wrapped in a shawl against the autumn chill. You're quiet tonight, he said, joining me at the railing. Just thinking. About? Everything. Nothing. How temporary feels increasingly permanent. How pretense has started feeling like truth. About what happens when this arrangement ends, I said instead. His shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. Aniyah. It's fine. I knew the terms when I signed. I forced brightness into my voice. I'm just grateful for the time, for feeling seen, for mattering, even temporarily, for falling in love with someone I can't have. for the experience. Silence stretched between us, different from our comfortable quiet. This was loaded, painful, full of things neither of us could say. "You've changed things," Kayden said finally, his voice rough. "The way I think, the way I lead. You've made me remember there's more to life than duty and strategy. You would have remembered eventually." "No." He turned to face me, and there was something raw in his expression that made my breath catch. "I wouldn't have. I was drowning in that coldness, becoming my father without realizing it. And then you walked into that gathering hall, looking terrified and brave and so completely yourself, and I—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "You what?" I whispered. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered against my cheek, warm and achingly gentle. "I started remembering how to be human," he said softly. His hand dropped. The loss of contact felt like grief. "We should go in," he said, stepping back. "It's getting cold." As we walked back to the house, careful space between us now, I thought about Elena's warning, about temporary and permanent, about hearts that don't respect arrangements. And I realized with crushing certainty that mine had already broken the rules. 5 weeks in, and I'd stopped remembering this was supposed to be temporary. Mornings began with Kayden's smile over coffee. Evenings ended with our fingers brushing as we said goodnight, lingering a moment too long. The line between pretense and reality had blurred so thoroughly I could no longer see where one ended and the other began. Then everything shattered at dawn. I was still in my nightgown when pounding footsteps echoed through the hallway outside my room. Kayden's voice, sharp with command. "Wake the council. Full war room, 10 minutes." I threw on clothes and found him in the corridor, already dressed, his expression locked into that mask of control I hadn't seen in weeks. "What's happened?" "Attack on the Riverwood territory. 3 dead, including their beta." His jaw tightened. The assassins were targeting the Ashford family specifically. My blood went cold. Ashford, the name I'd overheard whispered in council meetings, always followed by significant glances, the intended Omega's family. "I'm coming with you," I said. He started to protest, then nodded once. "Quickly." The war room thrummed with controlled chaos. Maps covered every surface, council members arriving in various states of dress, voices overlapping with speculation and demands. Kayden stood at the head of the table, radiating authority, while I slipped into a chair against the wall, present but invisible, just as I'd learned. 3 coordinated strikes, Lady Voss reported, her usual composure frayed. Precision timing, knowledge of patrol patterns. This wasn't opportunistic. Someone planned this. "The question is who," another advisor said, "and why now?" I studied the map as they debated, my mind cycling through weeks of intelligence reports I'd helped Kayden review. Border movements, trade disruptions, the Laurent Pac's suspicious resource stockpiling. Pieces of a puzzle I'd been assembling without realizing. "It's the Laurent Pac," I said. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to me. "Miss Berry," Lady Voss said with strained patience, "perhaps you should—" "Let her speak." Kayden's voice cut through the dismissal. I stood on shaking legs and approached the map. 3 weeks ago, Laurent started consolidating forces here and here. I pointed to 2 locations. They claimed it was for harvest protection, but those areas don't produce anything worth guarding. Last week, they moved supplies to these border outposts, the exact positions that would give them advantage if they wanted to destabilize Riverwood. "That's circumstantial," Lady Voss protested. "Maybe, but look at the timing of the attacks." I traced the pattern with my finger. First strike hits here, the Eastern Patrol. Second here, drawing forces away from the Ashford residence. The third strike had a clear path because we responded exactly as expected. They studied our protocols. Kayden leaned over the map, his expression intent. If you're right, they'll strike again. Where? My heart hammered. This was beyond offering observations over breakfast. Lives depended on getting this right. I studied the map, thinking through Laurent's resources, their positioning, what they'd gain. Here, I pointed to a bridge crossing. It's the main supply route to Riverwood. If they take it, they can cut off reinforcements and strangle the territory economically, and the Ashford family would have to evacuate through Laurent-controlled territory, Kayden finished, understanding flashing in his eyes, where they'd be vulnerable to capture. He turned to his advisors. Triple the bridge guard, send 2 units to secure alternate routes, and someone get me eyes on Laurent troop movements. Now. The room exploded into action. Plans were made, orders dispatched, strategies refined. Through it all, Kayden kept glancing at me with something like wonder, and I felt the shift. I wasn't just the Omega sitting quietly anymore. I was his partner in this. Hours blurred together. Reports came in confirming my assessment. Laurent forces were indeed moving toward the bridge. Kayden's preemptive positioning forced them to retreat, their plan exposed before it could fully unfold. The crisis ebbed slowly, tension releasing degree by degree. Near midnight, the war room finally emptied, leaving just Kayden and me amid maps and cold coffee cups. Exhaustion lined his face, but there was something else there too. Relief, gratitude, and that dangerous warmth I'd learned to recognize. You saved lives today, he said quietly. You saw what trained strategists missed. I just paid attention to the reports you shared with me. No. He moved closer, and suddenly the vast room felt intimate, just the 2 of us in lamplight and silence. You're brilliant, Aniyah. Strategic, insightful, exactly what this kingdom needs. He stopped, jaw clenching. The air between us charged with everything unsaid. We stood too close, his eyes dark with exhaustion and something that made my breath catch. I could see his control fraying, could feel my own resolve crumbling. Kayden, I whispered. He lifted his hand, fingers trembling slightly as they brushed my cheek. His thumb traced my lower lip with aching gentleness, and I forgot how to breathe. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then back to my eyes, asking permission. I swayed toward him, closing the space between us, and he jerked back like I'd burned him. We can't. The loss of his touch felt physical. Kayden, this isn't real, Aniyah. His voice was rough, almost desperate. It's an arrangement, temporary, we agreed. That was 5 weeks ago, before nothing. But his hands were shaking, and his eyes betrayed him, full of longing and regret and fear. You deserve better than being someone's political convenience. And if I don't want better, if I want this, want you... A sharp knock interrupted us. Mrs. Chen entered without waiting for permission, her expression unusually grave. Alpha King, there's an urgent arrival. The Ashford Omega is here, seeking sanctuary. Everything inside me went cold. Kayden's mask slammed back into place. Show her to the blue suite, full security detail. She's asked to speak with you immediately. Give me 10 minutes. Mrs. Chen withdrew. In the silence that followed, I couldn't look at him. The intended Omega, the real choice, the one I'd been keeping warm the place for. Aniyah, you should go to her. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. She's in danger. She needs you. We're not finished. Yes, we are. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Go be the Alpha. King Kayden, do your duty. That's what this was always about. I left before he could respond, before the tears threatening to spill could betray just how thoroughly I'd broken our arrangement's cardinal rule. The Ashford Omega was everything I wasn't. Tall and graceful, with platinum hair and violet eyes that belonged in fairy tales. She stood in the grand entrance hall looking regal despite her disheveled travel clothes, and when Kayden entered she turned to him with obvious relief. Alpha King, thank you for providing sanctuary. Of course. Kayden's voice was formal, distant. You're safe here. I watched from the stairs as they spoke, noting the absolute lack of spark between them. He stood too far away, his posture polite but cold. She addressed him with respect but no warmth. This was the woman his council had chosen, the political match that made sense. And neither of them looked at each other the way Kayden looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. There's someone else, isn't there? Kayden said quietly, surprising her. The Omega, I'd heard someone call her Lyra, startled, then sagged slightly. Is it that obvious? Only because I understand the feeling. Her eyes widened, then softened with something like sympathy. Then we're both trapped, Alpha King. It would seem so. I turned away, unable to watch any more, but I'd seen enough to know the arrangement was ending. The intended Omega had arrived, and no matter what had grown between Kayden and me in these stolen weeks, duty would always win. It had to. That's how stories like ours were supposed to end. The council demanded an answer within 48 hours. The attack has destabilized the region, Lady Voss declared during an emergency session. You must declare your intended mate publicly, Alpha King. The pack needs certainty. The territories need to see strength and alliance. I sat in my usual chair, invisible again, watching Kayden's jaw tighten with each demand. Lyra Ashford stood before the council with perfect posture, the image of everything an Alpha King's mate should be. Powerful bloodline, political connections, trained since childhood for exactly this role. The Ashford alliance would secure the Eastern Territories, one advisor pressed. It's the logical choice. Logical, strategic, expected. All the words that had governed Kayden's life. I'll make my declaration at the gathering tomorrow night, Kayden said, his voice carefully neutral. This session is adjourned. That night, I began packing. Not much had accumulated in 5 weeks. Most of the elegant clothes belonged to the estate, not to me. I folded my few personal items with mechanical precision, each piece a small acknowledgement of ending. Elena found me there, tears streaming silently down my face as I wrapped a book Kayden had given me, a collection of poetry he'd noticed me admiring in the library. Oh dear. She closed the door softly behind her. You're leaving. After tomorrow. After he makes the right choice. I tried to smile and failed. I always knew this was temporary. Knowing and accepting are different things. It doesn't matter what I accept, it matters what's best for the kingdom. I set the book in my bag with shaking hands. Lyra is perfect for him. The council wants her. The territories need that alliance, and she's everything I'm not. She's not you, Elena said simply. And I've seen the way he looks at you, child. That's not something politics can create. Then he'll have to learn to look at someone else. The gathering hall glittered with witnesses. Every major pack leader, council members, territorial representatives, all assembled to see the Alpha King finally choose his mate. I dressed carefully in a midnight blue gown, armor disguised as silk, and tried to memorize what it felt like to belong here, even briefly. Lyra found me in an antechamber before the ceremony. She looked ethereal in silver, every inch the future queen. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it, "for complicating things." "Don't be." Her violet eyes were kind. "You gave me hope that there might be another way." She hesitated, then admitted, "There's someone in my territory, a warrior, no political value, completely unsuitable. I thought I'd have to let him go, marry for duty like my parents did. But watching you and Kayden these past 2 days, the way you orbit each other even when you're trying not to," she smiled sadly, "it made me wonder if love might be worth fighting for." Before I could respond, Mrs. Chen appeared. "It's time." The hall fell silent as Kayden entered. He wore a formal black silver thread catching the light, looking every inch the Alpha King. Powerful, commanding, untouchable. His gaze swept the crowd and stopped on me, and for one breathless moment the mask cracked. Then he took his position at the front of the hall, and I prepared to watch my heart break in public. "Thank you all for coming," Kayden began, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Recent events have made it clear that leadership requires more than strength. It requires alliance, trust, and partnership." I dug my nails into my palms, focusing on the pain to keep the tears at bay. Many of you know that Lyra Ashford has been considered an ideal match for the Alpha King. He gestured to where Lyra stood, poised and perfect. Her bloodline is impeccable, her training exemplary, her political value undeniable. This was it, the end of pretending. She would make an exceptional queen, Kayden continued, for someone else. The hall erupted in whispers. Lady Voss stood, her face incredulous. "Alpha King, surely you're not—" "I'm not finished." Steel edged his voice, and the room went silent again. His eyes found mine across the crowd. "I need to speak with someone first, privately." He crossed the hall toward me, ignoring the shocked faces, the scandalized whispers. When he reached me, he extended his hand. "Walk with me," he said softly. "Please." I took his hand because I'd never learned how to deny him anything. He led me to a private balcony overlooking the estate grounds, city lights glittering in the distance like earthbound stars. The noise of the gathering faded behind closed doors, leaving just us and the night air. "I've spent my entire life doing what's expected," Kayden said, not looking at me yet. "Making strategic choices, being the king everyone needed, never the man I wanted to be. My father taught me that love was weakness, that emotion clouds judgment, that duty always supersedes desire." "Kayden, let me finish." He turned to face me, and there was something raw and vulnerable in his expression that made my chest ache. "Then you walked into that gathering hall 5 weeks ago, looking terrified and brave, and so completely yourself, and you changed everything. You showed me what it means to be seen, not just obeyed, to be known, not just respected. Tears blurred my vision. You have to choose Lyra. The kingdom needs a leader who's whole, not hollow." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his warmth. "You've made me whole, Aniyah. You've reminded me how to laugh, how to trust, how to see beyond strategy to the people behind the politics. You're brilliant and brave, and you see straight through to the truth of things. You make me want to be better than the cold king my father trained me to be." "I'm nobody," I whispered. "No bloodline, no connections, no political value. You're everything." His hands cupped my face with infinite gentleness. "I don't want perfect, Aniyah. I don't want politically advantageous or strategically sound. I want real. I want you. And I know this breaks our arrangement. I know it's not what you signed up for, but I have to ask." "Yes?" The word broke from me like a prayer. Whatever you're asking, yes. His smile transformed his face, chasing away years of loneliness. Then be my queen, not because duty demands it, but because my heart does, because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that being chosen for yourself is worth more than any political alliance. You love me? Desperately, completely. Probably since that first dance when you looked at me like I was human instead of just a crown. I laughed through my tears. I've loved you since you promised to treat me as a person, not a pawn. He kissed me then, tender and fierce and full of promise, and it felt like coming home to a place I'd never known existed. When we returned to the gathering hall, hand in hand, the room went silent. Kayden led me to the front and turned to face the crowd. Aniyah Berry is my choice, he declared, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. Not because politics demand it, but because she's shown me what true partnership means. She's proven her strategic value, her courage, her capacity to see what others miss. But more than that, she's shown me that the strongest alliances are built on genuine connection, not convenient arrangement. Lady Voss stood again, face mottled with anger. This is unacceptable. The council will not. The council serves at my pleasure, Kayden said coolly. Question my choice, question me. But I suggest you consider carefully whether you want to oppose an Alpha King who's finally found something worth fighting for. Lyra stepped forward, drawing every eye. If I may speak. Kayden nodded. I'm grateful, Lyra said, her voice clear and strong. Grateful to the Alpha King for his honesty, and grateful to Aniyah for showing me that we don't have to sacrifice everything for duty. Love and leadership aren't mutually exclusive. She smiled at someone in the crowd, a broad-shouldered warrior who looked at her like she'd hung the moon. I choose love too, and I'll work to build alliance through respect and cooperation, not forced bonds. The hall erupted, some in approval, others in outrage. But Kayden's hand tightened around mine, anchoring me through the chaos. You're sure? I whispered. This will cost you politically. Let it, he said. You're worth it. We're worth it. And looking into his eyes, seeing love and certainty reflected back at me, I finally believed him. The emergency council session convened at dawn, and I knew it would be brutal. Lady Voss sat at the table like a judge preparing to deliver sentence, her expression carved from ice. The other council members ranged from skeptical to openly hostile, except for Marcus, the diplomatic advisor who'd always treated me with cautious respect. This is unprecedented, Lady Voss began, not bothering with pleasantries. An Alpha King choosing an Omega with no political value, no bloodline, no training. Careful, Kayden said softly, but his voice carried a warning that made her pause. You're speaking about your future queen. That's exactly the problem. She's not equipped for this role. She doesn't understand pack politics, territorial law, the intricacies of the Laurent Pac's coordinated attack pattern, I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. The one that every trained strategist in this room missed while I identified it. The room went silent. Lady Voss's lips thinned. I stood, forcing myself to meet each skeptical gaze. I understand that I'm not what you expected. I don't have the bloodline or training you value. But I've spent 5 weeks learning this kingdom, studying intelligence reports, observing territorial dynamics. I see patterns because I'm not blinded by decades of political assumptions. One lucky observation doesn't qualify you to be queen, another advisor said. You're right, it doesn't. I placed my hands flat on the table, channeling every ounce of confidence I didn't quite feel. But my genuine care for this pack's well-being does. My willingness to learn does. My ability to see the Alpha King not as a chess piece to be maneuvered, but as a partner to support. I looked at Kayden, then back to the council. I won't pretend I know everything, but I'm willing to work harder than anyone in this room to prove I deserve the trust he's placed in me. Marcus leaned forward. You identified the Laurent threat. What would you recommend for addressing it long term? It was a test. I took a breath and began outlining strategies I'd been formulating. Diplomatic pressure, economic incentives for cooperation, strategic positioning that discouraged aggression without appearing hostile. As I spoke, I saw skepticism begin to shift, if not to approval, at least to consideration. Interesting, Marcus said when I finished. Unconventional, but sound. She doesn't need your approval, Kayden said quietly, steel beneath velvet. But she has mine. Question her, you question me. Oppose her, you oppose your Alpha King. I suggest you consider whether that's a line you want to cross. The threat hung in the air. One by one, council members nodded their reluctant acceptance. Lady Voss held out longest, but even she finally inclined her head. We'll see if your faith is warranted, Alpha King. You will, Kayden said. I promise you that. Over the following weeks, I proved myself inch by inch. A territorial dispute resolved through patient negotiation rather than force. Trade agreements restructured to benefit smaller packs. A welfare system for pack members who fell through the cracks. The forgotten ones I understood because I'd been one of them. Slowly, the council's skepticism transformed into grudging respect. Even Lady Voss began consulting me on matters she'd once deemed beyond my understanding. And Lyra, she bonded with her warrior Marcus in a ceremony that sent ripples through the territories. A powerful Omega choosing love over political advantage gave others permission to imagine different futures. Applications to break unfair bonding contracts flooded the courts. Young Omegas began speaking up in council meetings, their voices finally heard. The transformation had begun. Our own bonding ceremony took place on the autumn equinox, 6 weeks after Kayden's declaration. We kept it intimate, just the council, key allies and trusted household staff in the estate's rose garden where we'd taken so many evening walks. Elena helped me dress in a gown of deep sapphire, simple and elegant, nothing like the elaborate confections I'd seen other Omegas wear. But the true treasure was what Kayden had given me that morning, a delicate silver circlet that had belonged to his mother. She would have loved you, he'd said, placing it gently on my head. She believed leadership should come from the heart. You embody everything she hoped I'd find. Now, I stood before him as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. He wore a formal black, but his eyes held only warmth, only love, only absolute certainty. The officiant spoke the traditional words, but when it came time for our personal vows, Kayden took my hands and everything else fell away. Aniyah Berry, you walked into my life when I'd forgotten what it meant to be human. You saw past the crown to the lonely man beneath, and you chose to stay anyway. You challenged me, changed me, reminded me that the greatest strength comes from authenticity, not isolation. His voice roughened with emotion. I vow to choose you every day. Not because duty demands it, but because my heart does, to see you, value you, stand beside you as an equal in all things, to build a kingdom where love isn't weakness, but the foundation of everything strong. Tears blurred my vision as I began my own vows. Kayden Long, you took someone the world had dismissed and treated me like I mattered. You gave me space to be myself and celebrated rather than criticized what you found. You taught me that being seen is better than being perfect, that authenticity is more valuable than any bloodline. I squeezed his hands. I vow to choose you every day, to be your partner in leadership, your comfort in difficulty, your reminder that you're loved for who you are, not what you provide, to help build a kingdom where no one has to hide their truth to belong. The bonding ritual was ancient magic. Our wrists bound together with silver cord, the officiant's blessing. The moment when our wolves recognized and claimed each other. Heat bloomed where our skin touched, spreading up our arms in delicate marks that would forever identify us as bonded mates. When Kayden kissed me, sealing our vows, I felt the bond snap into place. A golden thread connecting our hearts, our minds, our souls. I'd never believed in destiny before, but this felt inevitable, like everything in my life had been leading me here. The garden erupted in applause. Even Mrs. Chen was smiling, though she'd deny it later. 3 years passed like a dream made solid. The kingdom transformed under our joint leadership, more equitable, more compassionate, stronger for embracing authenticity over political calculation. Other territories began adopting our policies. Omegas throughout the region found courage to choose their own paths. The Laurent Pack, faced with economic pressure and diplomatic isolation after their attempted destabilization, eventually sued for peace. Now I stood in our private garden at dawn, Kayden's arms around me from behind, watching the sun paint the horizon in shades of hope. His bonding mark gleamed silver on my wrist, twin to the one I'd placed on his. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked softly. "Choosing me over the strategic match?" His laugh rumbled against my back. "Every single day." I elbowed him gently, and he pressed a kiss to my temple. "I regret wasting 5 weeks pretending this was temporary when I knew from that first dance you'd changed everything." He turned me to face him, his amber eyes warm with love that still stole my breath. "You were never a pawn, Aniyah. You were always the queen. I just had to learn to see it." I reached up to cup his face, thumb tracing the line of his jaw. "We taught each other how to be free. We did," he covered my hand with his, "and we're teaching others that it's possible. That love and leadership aren't incompatible. That the strongest bonds come from choice, not obligation." Behind us, the estate was beginning to wake. Elena probably already preparing breakfast, Mrs. Chen organizing the day's schedule, council members arriving for our weekly strategy session. A full life, a meaningful life, built on truth rather than pretense. "Ready to change the world some more today?" Kayden asked. I laced my fingers through his, our bonding marks aligned. 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something extraordinary from honest connection. "With you?" "Always." We turned to face the sunrise together. Equals in power and love, proof that the greatest strength comes not from perfect positioning but from authentic partnership. From being brave enough to choose your own path, even when the whole world expects something different. From believing that love found in unexpected places can be more powerful than any political alliance, and that being truly seen is worth more than being perfectly positioned. The dawn light caught our intertwined hands, and I thought about that girl who'd stood invisible at a gathering hall, certain she'd never mattered to anyone. She'd been wrong. She'd always mattered. She'd just needed someone who knew how to look. And together we'd built a kingdom that made sure no one else would ever have to feel invisible again.